Scott Burgholzer, and we'll be talking about lessons learned while building a highly available serverless client portal on AWS. So what do encrypted one-time password codes, base64 encoding, and Azure Active Directory all have in common? Well, they all tried to break the serverless client portal I was working on. None of them succeeded, but each taught me something AWS documentation does not mention. But first, a little bit about me. For ChatGPT, when I was coming up with personal branding, it came up with I'm the cloud professor. One, because I'm a cloud engineer at a small weather forecasting company called Weather Command, based here in the Chicagoland region. I am an AWS community builder, my second year in this program. And that I'm working on a Doctor of Technology degree through Purdue University online through the West Lafayette, Indiana campus. Some little personal tidbits. I love to travel and storm chase. This is a tornado I got many years ago on a College of DePaid storm chase field studies trip. Also been into painting recently, and also into video gaming. So, yeah, I don't chase hurricanes. So, my company's had a client portal for a while. So, I've come along and tried to modernize it. So, the legacy architecture we've had and the challenges is we've had an EC2 server, one server, no load balancing, no auto-scaling groups, nothing, just one. And due to that, we had to over-provision it because we can't right-size it. This is going to sound odd, but weather events cause sudden traffic spikes, which we can't predict. Being a weather company, of course we can predict it. But because of no ability to auto-scale or anything like that, it's just impossible. And then we always have the time of day variations because it's a more day event, more people are up, night event, less people. We also have an over-provisioned RDS database. It's a single AZ deployment for cost reasons, so we don't have high availability there within a single region even. And it's just plain expensive for our use case. Our website and client portal is based on WordPress. I am not a fan of WordPress. I really believe it is bloated, especially for our needs. Just has features we don't use. There's times I have to go in to do things and I have no clue what I'm doing because I don't know where anything is. And then there's also the plugin compatibility issues that you can run into. And our client portal we're using right now is a WordPress plugin. It's probably been about 3 years since the last update because it's no longer supported. Hence why we needed to come up with a new portal solution. And it has limited functionality and poor mobile experience. So I decided to build a serverless version of it. So that needed authentication and authorization. So Amazon Incognito. It handles the user registration. No users can't sign up themselves, and an admin has to do it for them, but that's all in it. Handles the login and the token management. We also integrate with Azure AD because it'll also become an internal portal as well, so all in one. So our forecasters and employees don't have to remember more passwords and usernames. Just use their Microsoft account. For the static website and the files we upload for our clients, we use Amazon S3 and CloudFront. A single page Vue.js app that's for the static stuff. Use the CloudFront for the caching because static, you don't have to call make a call to the S3 bucket every time. And then don't have to worry about scaling because that's built in. We also use Amazon DynamoDB for dynamic data storage. So it stores users' preferences, file metadata, and also some portal configuration within a single table. We do the on-demand version because, again, our traffic varies. So just on demand, use what we use when we use it, and when there's no weather going on, as in clear skies, there's obviously weather still going on, but no one's using it, so we're not paying. We use API Gateway and Lambda for our API layer. So again, serverless, don't have to worry about maintaining scaling or anything of that. And then currently it's also behind a CloudFront distribution. And again, that's CloudFront in general, which also helps eliminate CORS issues because having an origin for the API gateway makes it the same domain request. So as we'll learn later, that comes to kind of bite me later on in my development. So this is a quick, simple architecture diagram to showing the CloudFront, the S3 static website, the Cognito user pool, the Azure AD integration, API gateway, Lambda functions, just proving it's all serverless. So just going to give a quick demo to show you how it looks for the user, and then we'll go into lessons learned and how it looks so simple, but it wasn't. If I find the right page. So I just very simply, an external user enters their email. It's emailed a one-time password code. If I go here, ignore all the unread emails in my inbox. This is a custom email, so we'll go over that as well. No, that's not what I wanted either. So this is all through Cognito. Now here we're doing API Gateway because these cards are dynamic based on if they're an internal user, external user, and also what they're allowed to see. View weather data is just simple link page. We have plans to make this more fun by interactive graphs and maps and stuff, but we had to simplify the project and make it more user-friendly. And then documents is where they can view their products from us from the S3 bucket and only their products. They can view and download. So pretty simple, more modern, more user-friendly, and mobile-friendly. All good things. So now going into the lessons. First one is dealing with identity federation when standard solutions fail. So the problem I was having was I was trying to use the groups I had in Entra ID and mapping them into Cognito. So I use OpenTofu, that's why that's up there, but I'm considering using CDK since we're just an AWS shop. But so simple solutions seem to be used the attribute mapping feature. Well, I couldn't get that to work. Then I did research. I used Amazon Q, CLI to help, and went into the client on the Azure side, the application on there, to admit groups as role claims, which somehow makes it a text string instead of like a ARN-like thing. Still didn't work. I'm banging my head against the wall. So what I figured out was to use one of the Cognito triggers that it has for the token trigger and create a Lambda function. So every time the user logs in, this pre-token Lambda will run. If it's an Azure, an Entra ID user, it will go to Microsoft Graph API and pull the groups that that user is assigned to in real time, which also means if they get reassigned groups, it's an automatic reassignment within the portal too. So it worked in the end. Next part, encryption complexity. So that custom email I showed you with the one-time password code, I'm using the Cognito one-time password code that they introduced. This took me over a month to figure out. So, one, the default emails they'll send with the password, the one-time password code is just a plain text email with the password code. That's it. No branding, no nothing. I'm like, no. I want my users to know it's from us. So in the end, the solution was to come up with a custom email sender Lambda trigger within Cognito using AWS Encryption SDK v4. How I figured this out? A lot of work, a lot of Amazon Q, me going back and forth, because Cognito user pool and app creates a KMS key. So you'd think, oh, just use that KMS key to decrypt the one-time password code. That's not how it works. It actually uses key rings, and you also have to use AWS Encryption SDK version 4 with Material Providers Library. So you gotta make sure you get that specific version of it with the NPL in order to decrypt it all. It was not fun to figure out. I was so happy when I did figure it out, though. I might have ran around my office celebrating, in fact. There was just poor documentation. There was just a lot of trial and error, using error messages, going and serializing. Okay, what does this error say? Help me figure this out so we can reverse engineer this. There was just a lot of time researching this. I hardly coded during this month and a half. It was just a lot of research, which you think I should be used to being a doctoral student, but I like coding too. And one of the key lessons here is try to budget significant time for research, because you never know what you're going to run into, as I did in this case. And I just wanted to show a little bit of the code here. I did this in Python. This is just the part of the Lambda function that matters. So I had to do all this in import statements to get it all to work. That was fun. Then, because it's a binary data that's being passed, Cognito encodes it in base 64 so it can transport as text over JSON and HTTP. So you gotta decode that. Then you gotta get the SDK, the encryption SDK, which I had to create a custom layer for Lambda to use with this specific commitment policy. This was also a challenge to figure out. So based on trial and error and Q and me discussing it, this was figured to be the best practice of using this specific commitment policy, which essentially states that if you're encrypting new data, always use key commitment for stronger security. Obviously, we're not encrypting anything here, so we really don't care, but it's best practice to have it in there. And the decrypting part says to use both committed and non-committed keys for backwards compatibility. Because just to be safe with Cognito, because who knows, I don't want to mess with Is it committed, not committed? Just backwards compatibility from the start. And then, of course, the KMS client. And then you create the material provider. Then you get the KMS key passed in from the Cognito. Create the keyring configuration. Then you can create the keyring. And then finally you can decrypt. Whereas if it was just a simple KMS key, you could just decrypt in one line, essentially. And then, of course, converting the bytes into text for the email. So, seems pretty simple once you see it in code. Not so simple when you're trying to figure it out for the first time. So now, another lesson, API cores issues. I don't like dealing with cores. I'll admit that. So, if we were using the API gateway URL directly from the front end, there would be issues because the request would be coming from weathercommand.com, going to the API gateway URL and course issues. So I'm like, I tried to figure it out. I gave up. This was also after I dealt with that one-time password code encryption. I'm like, I'm not going to spend as much time as I did on that. I want to get this done. So then I realized you can do API gateway can be an origin within your CloudFront distribution. And then I did slash a path, a behavior within CloudFront of slash API slash star. But I have to remove that API before I send it to API gateway. Because then it's like, oh, the full path is slash API. No, you don't have the API, forget that. So CloudFront function was used to do that. And because it's the same origin request, cores is not an issue. Yay! Until later on. We'll get to that again. Next up, now, I was working on multi-region after the US East 1 region outage, but it was always in the plan even before that happened, so we weren't scrambling. We already had this planned. Because again, serverless, put it in another region, it just sits idle unless we use it. So, for documents, we don't want our clients to lose access to those. So, we decided to have cross-region S3 buckets for our products so that they would sync. So had to set that up, set up all the same bucket permissions, all that fun stuff. But then I'm like, I really don't want to code in if this region use this, else this. So we wanted to figure out a way to use a single endpoint for multi-region S3 document access. So S3 has multi-region access point, or MRAP. And I love saying MRAP for some reason. However, we were getting access denied errors despite having MRAP ARN permissions in our Lambda functions. Well, that's because we discovered we also needed permissions for the underlying buckets, which now going through it's like that kind of makes sense to me now. So the permission for the Lambda functions to access the bucket actually can have a total of 6 ARNs in them. 2 for the MRAP, 2 for each bucket in each region. 1 just for the bucket name, and 1 with a /star for to access each object. Just to get it done and over with and not deal with fine-tuning them even more. So that's what we did, or I did, I should say. So that was another couple days, luckily. Now, for viewing the products or documents, we wanted them to be able to view it in the browser and download. So, first thought, pre-signed URLs. Seems simple enough. If you have learned anything from what I've shared so far, it's not going to be simple. So, wanted to use them. Simple, clean approach. Should have been straightforward. Well, they wouldn't properly display or download in the browser. I tried the built-in browser display. I tried for PDF documents. We have a mix of PDF, mostly PDF, some XLS, some text documents. I tried using JavaScript PDF viewer libraries and nothing. It would just be errors or a white page or just the thing with nothing in it. And the download would just be a binary file. It's like, okay, what's going on? So I struggled with it for a bit. And as I've learned from multiple other things, I'm like, let's see if there's another way of doing this so I don't spend weeks on this problem. So through API Gateway, we're using a Lambda proxy with base64 encoding. So the Lambda will fetch the document from S3, do some stuff, and then serve it back through the API Gateway as a base64 encoded object. Then the front end will decode the base64 and create a blob URL to display it in the browser and also for the download. So that worked. So key takeaway I learned from this one was sometimes the simple solution doesn't work in practice, or it might take too long to debug and research, so you need to move on to another method. Don't always focus on one thing. There's other ways of doing the same thing. Cloudflare origin groups, the post method limitation. Remember cores? Here's where it came back. So, again, we wanted everything to be multi-region. And of course, with API Gateway, you have to deploy it in the other region, deploy the Lambda functions. No big deal, especially with infrastructure as code. That's easy enough. Well, Cloudflare origin groups don't support post, put, delete methods. Only essentially just read option methods. And well, obviously, when we're trying to create clients, create users, submit the contact form, that doesn't help us at all. Because the idea was, in CloudFront, you can have multiple origins, and then you can have them as a origin group, and then set up a failover based on HTTP status codes. So I'm like, easy enough. Until I tried to create a client, it's like, it's a successful, but why are you not in my database or Cognito? Oh. So right now, we're using a single region API gateway. My current thought process is to use Route 53 DNS failover, create two records in Route 53, CNAME, health checks within Route 53, and set a failover policy. That's my current thought process, though. After the presentations, I'll be around. If you have any suggestions, I'm more than happy to listen, because I want to find a solution to this that works. So then, kind of going back to the multi-region failover for S3, focusing specifically on the static website. So obviously we want the website to be available, especially the portal part. Initially, because I had just done the multi-region access point for the documents bucket, I'm like, oh, I could just use that. But then Good thing I was using Q to double check my ideas. It's like, well, that's actually kind of more expensive for static content that doesn't change much. I'm like, you're right. Why was I even thinking this? Oh yeah, I just did this and I loved it for that process. So I was like, oh, I can use it again. Yeah. Um, so no, CloudFront. Use CloudFront since that's where it's being uh, referenced from anyway. So just use the origin groups, HTTP 400 errors, 500 errors, redirect to the other region. Simple. That was the first simple thing that actually worked for me. I'm like, why couldn't it happen for everything else? Just had to make sure the bucket policies were the same for the CloudFront access, the origin access control, bucket settings, versioning control, all that fun stuff. But again, with infrastructure code, not a huge deal. And then it just was a cost-effective failover for static content that doesn't change frequently. The only thing on the static website that changes is mostly the biographies for our staff and management, but even then that's not that often, so easy to go in, update it, push it to GitHub, have it run a GitHub action, and invalidate the CloudFront cache, and then create a new cache, whatever. So then, the AWS service evolution, when to update and when to stay stable. So I will admit, I had already had Cognito working with a custom solution thanks to Jan, oh, I forget his last name. He's a serverless hero based in New Zealand. CUI, I think maybe. He had on creating custom Lambda functions using triggers in Cognito for a passwordless magic leak login. So I had that set up using his instructions. And then Cognito came out with, oh, hey, now we can do one-time password codes. And being a small company where money is part of our decision-making factor, like, if I can remove some Lambda functions, great. So I decided to do that. And of course, then you saw what happened. So, so yeah, AWS releases these features and services constantly. Existing services get new capabilities, improved APIs. The challenge is deciding what to adopt, what to ignore, and when to update. So the example with Cognito for me, luckily that was the only thing I had done with this project, so it wasn't that big of a deal to switch. So I kind of regretted it at the time when I was switching, but now I don't. It did kind of form a decision framework for me, though, of if there's these new updates from AWS, if there's a security reason for the update, I'm of course going to try to implement that right away. If there's an update that creates breaking changes, I need to evaluate it carefully. Is the benefit worth the migration effort? You don't want to spend a lot of time if it's not worth the effort. New features, I'll only adopt if they serve a current problem. If they don't serve a current problem, ignore them. Performance improvements, just consider if they impact user experience. If they don't really impact your user experience, then why even bother trying to update? Especially if it's milliseconds or something. It's like, who's really going to notice that? Especially in a client portal case. And then anything relating to cost optimizations, test evaluate the return on investment, the implementation time versus savings. And implementation might take more than it's worth. So, and then that will help you prevent decision fatigue from the constant technology churn. Which, as a single developer at my company, that is a big thing. So I'm happy this kind of helped me come up with this process. So we just want to balance the innovation with stability and maintenance burden, because you need to also keep what you're doing maintained. So you don't want to neglect what you already have while trying to do these new services and stuff. Unless you're writing an article for AWS or something about these new features. Then you kind of have to, but that's a special use case. So overall, the serverless architecture did deliver on the promises that we were looking for: the scalability, cost efficiency, and reduced management. But also, sometimes what we thought were the simple solutions often turn into complex implementations. And oftentimes you won't find these in the documentation, so you have to do it on your own. And you might have to bang your head a few times on the wall. What worked well for me during this? The DynamoDB global tables. That was a nice, simple thing. Lambda for compute scaling and cost optimization, other than figuring out what I needed for the one-time password code decryption. The Lambda stuff was good. CloudFront, easy, especially the failover for static website bucket. The multi-region access point, even with that IAM complexity I ran into, wasn't that hard. Took a couple hours to solve. Was harder than expected. The identity provider integration, especially with those intra-ID groups. Dealing with binary data through API gateway. The multi-region API failover with cores. And then, of course, the AWS encryption SDK complexity for cognito one-time password codes. So, if there's anything to take from my presentation, it's budget time for the unexpected. Don't assume your standard integrations will work out of the box. Sometimes complex solutions are the ones that actually work. Document everything, you'll need it later. And sometimes good enough is good enough. So with that, I thank you. Here's my contact information and a survey that can help if you feel so inclined to fill out, so that I can learn and improve my presentation skills. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Do we have any questions? Let me come to you. Hold on.
For your multi-region failover versus keeping S3 buckets in sync, was that handled by MRAP, or how did you handle that?
That's through the S3 itself. Had to set up the cross-region replication in each bucket. And then, of course, had to set up the permissions correctly, the versioning, test all within the S3 buckets themselves. MRAP was setting up the single endpoint for them.
Any other questions? Okay.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. That's really interesting. But I had a question about the multi-region part. Did you test like a regional failover? And if so, how?
Not yet, because of the API gateway issue that I ran into. I need to figure that out, and then I'm going to test that. That's in my development environment, so it's not live yet.
Do you have a plan for how you would test the regional failover? Like I think AWS has like the fault injection simulator
stuff
thing.
like that. Temporary modifying permissions to say you don't have access to this bucket, or the API gateway, stuff like that, yeah.
Monday, October 20th.
If we could just repeat that, that'll be a great test.
Quick question. How many people were involved to build the entire experience or application?
Me,
Just yourself?
just myself.
Nice. Cool.
Thanks.
So, how are you monitoring the environment? What products? And like, how do you troubleshoot all your APIs?
We're going to be using CloudWatch logs and metrics. Nothing set up in stone yet. That's still a work in progress. Because I need to make sure things are working first in my dev environment, and then go and also sit down with the stakeholders, like the president, vice president of my company, say, okay, what do we care about and what do we want to be alerted on? So I want to get them involved in that part. So it's almost there, still a little bit left to be done.
Yeah. Call you the last question. Then we'll save the rest for bonus food time.
What application or software you are using to deal with the binary data?
The base64 encoding. To convert it from binary into text to handle JSON, to be JSON and HTTP friendly, and then decoding it from base64 into the binary, and then using that in terms of the one-time password codes to decrypt that binary data, and then convert it into the string from the bytes, or in the case of the documents, take that binary data and convert it into a URL blob, which was the easiest way for me. I don't quite understand how URL blobs work. I just know they work. And I'm like, it works. I'm done for now. Good enough is sometimes good enough.
Hey, thank you. We'll have our presenters swap. Come on down. Yep, cool.